Driverly.com, unlimited drama series.
The wedding ring made a soft ping as it hit the concrete floor of my garage. 22 years of marriage reduced to a piece of metal rolling under my workbench like a dropped bolt. I didn't scramble to pick it up. Instead, I methodically assembled what I'd been planning for weeks. A digital recorder the size of a matchbook, a micro camera that looked like a shirt button, and my old boxing hand wraps. The kind of gear you can buy online for $50 if you know where to look. The kind of gear that changes everything. My name is Jack Morrison, and I fix cars for a living. Grease under my nails, calloused hands, the whole blue-collar package. My wife, Elena, she's a real estate lawyer who wears $1,000 suits and thinks I'm too stupid to notice when she's planning to destroy my life. She was wrong about the stupid part. From the garage, I could hear voices through the heating vents. Elena and our 18-year-old daughter, Sam, having one of their late-night strategy sessions. I'd installed the extra microphone up there 3 days ago, right after I found the first piece of evidence. "You think Dad's clueless?" Sam's voice carried down through the metal ductwork, clear as a bell. "The house is yours, Mom. He's just a speed bump. Sign the papers and you and Vincent can start fresh. Dad will survive somehow." Vincent. Elena's paralegal. 28 years old, drives a BMW, and thinks hair gel is a food group. I'd suspected for months, but hearing my own daughter casually discuss my destruction like a weekend grocery list, that was new. I rapped my knuckles slowly, the way my old boxing coach Marty taught me 30 years ago. Tight enough to protect the bones, loose enough to keep the blood flowing. Some habits die hard. The recorder went into my jacket pocket. The camera clipped to my shirt collar, disguised as a button. And the hand wraps? Those were just for luck. Or maybe intimidation. I hadn't decided yet. Elena's voice drifted down. "The house transfer papers are ready. Jack just needs to sign them tomorrow. Once that's done, Vincent and I can move forward with our plans." I poured myself 3 fingers of whiskey and listened to my wife and daughter plot my financial ruin like they were planning a birthday party. The bourbon burned, but not as much as the betrayal. See, here's what they didn't know. I might fix cars for a living, but I read every piece of paper that crosses my desk. Every contract, every warranty, every legal document. When you grow up poor, you learn that the devil lives in the details. And I'd already read those house transfer papers. The next morning started like any other day in our decaying industrial town. Coffee that tasted like motor oil. Local news full of plant closures and crime statistics. Elena getting ready for work in her glass and chrome office downtown. But today was different. Today, I was going to follow my wife to a motel. "Morning, honey," Elena said, not looking up from her phone as she grabbed her briefcase. She was wearing the red heels, the ones from the text message I'd seen on her phone 2 nights ago. "Room 412. Wear the red heels. Can't wait to see you." The text had been from Vincent, of course. Vincent with his slicked back hair and his BMW, and his complete lack of imagination when it came to adultery. "Have a good day at work," I said, watching her check her makeup in the hallway mirror. "I'll probably be late tonight. Got a transmission job that's giving me trouble." "That's fine," she said, still not looking at me. "I might be late too. Big case." Big case. Right. After Elena left, I waited exactly 10 minutes, then slipped out to my pickup truck. I'd installed a basic GPS tracker on her car 3 days ago. Nothing fancy, just a magnetic box that cost me $40 online. The kind of thing private investigators use when they're following cheating spouses. The tracker led me straight to the Grand River Motel on the outskirts of town. The kind of place where the sheets are questionable and the hourly rates are posted right on the sign. Vincent's BMW was already in the parking lot, gleaming like a beacon of infidelity. Room 412 was on the 2nd floor, accessible by an outdoor staircase that creaked under my work boots. I'd done some research on this place. Built in the 1960s, thin walls, doors that didn't quite fit their frames. Perfect for surveillance. The hallway smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. I could hear voices through the door of 412, but nothing clear enough for the recorder. That's when I noticed the door was slightly ajar, probably to let in some air, since the motel's ventilation system looked older than disco. Through the crack, I could see Elena sitting on the bed, Vincent standing beside her with his hand on her shoulder. They weren't having sex, but they were having the kind of intimate conversation that married people have. Except Elena was having it with someone who wasn't her husband. Jack signed the papers this morning, Elena was saying. By next week, the house will be in my name, and we can start making real plans. What about Sam? Vincent asked. Is she going to be a problem? Sam's on our side, Elena replied. She understands that her father is holding us back. Once we have the house, we can sell it and move somewhere better. Maybe that condo development by the river you showed me? I held the camera steady through the door crack, recording every word, every gesture, every casual betrayal. Vincent leaned down and kissed Elena's forehead like they were already married, like I was already dead and buried. That's when I decided to make my presence known. I slipped back down the hallway and waited by the staircase. When Vincent eventually came out of the room, I was ready. I'd printed out a photo from the surveillance footage, and I tucked it under his windshield wiper. Then, for good measure, I used my pocket knife to give his rear tire a slow leak. Nothing dramatic, just enough to ruin his day. The photo was perfect. Elena and Vincent in an intimate embrace, with the motel room number clearly visible in the background. I'd also written a note on the back. Smile, you're on candid camera. But here's where things got interesting. Instead of keeping this information to myself, I decided to share it. I made copies of the photo and sent one to Elena's law firm addressed to her boss. I sent another one to Vincent's wife, who I'd looked up online. Turns out Vincent was married too, with 2 kids and a mortgage. The third copy went to Sam at her college dorm with a note, "Thought you should see what your mother's big case really looks like." I was just getting started. The next morning, Elena burst into the garage while I was working on a brake job, waving a piece of paper like it was on fire. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, shoving the photo in my face. "Someone sent this to my boss, Jack." "My boss? Do you have any idea what this could do to my career?" I looked up from the brake caliper I was rebuilding, wiping my hands on a shop rag. "Looks like a photo of you and Vincent at a motel. Where'd it come from?" "Don't play dumb with me," she snapped. "I know you're behind this. You've been acting strange for weeks. And now this harassment starts? My boss wants to see me in his office this afternoon." "Maybe you should tell him the truth," I suggested. "That you've been sleeping with your paralegal and planning to steal our house. I bet that'll clear everything right up." Elena's face went white, then red, then white again. "I'm not sleeping with Vincent. We're just friends. And I'm not stealing anything. The house transfer was your idea, remember? For the kids' sake?" "Right," I said, turning back to the brake job. "For the kids. How's Sam handling all this, by the way? I heard she got a photo, too." That's when Elena really lost it. She started screaming about privacy and harassment and how I was destroying our family. The funny thing was, she never once denied the affair. She just kept talking about how inappropriate it was for me to have evidence of it. "You want to know what's inappropriate?" I said, standing up and facing her. "What's inappropriate is my wife and daughter planning my financial destruction while I'm working 60-hour weeks to pay for Sam's college tuition. What's inappropriate is you moving your boyfriend into our house before you've even divorced me." "Vincent is not my boyfriend," Elena said, but her voice had lost its conviction. "Then why is he texting you about wearing red heels to motel rooms?" I asked. "Why is he calling you baby in voicemails? Why did you tell him that I'm just a speed bump in your plans?" Elena's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She hadn't expected me to have recordings. "You've been spying on me," she finally managed. "I've been protecting myself," I corrected. There's a difference. That evening, Elena moved into the guest bedroom. Sam came home from college and immediately took her mother's side, which wasn't surprising since she'd been part of the conspiracy from the beginning. They held whispered conferences in the kitchen, while I ate dinner alone in the garage, listening to everything through my hidden microphones. Dad's lost his mind, Sam was saying. He's stalking you, Mom. That's illegal, isn't it? I don't know, Elena replied. But we need to be careful. If he's willing to follow me to a motel and take pictures, there's no telling what else he might do. What I might do. That was the question, wasn't it? I decided to call my old friend Marty, who runs a bar downtown and used to train boxers back in the day. Marty's seen every kind of human drama, and he's got the kind of practical wisdom that comes from watching people destroy themselves for decades. You want payback? Marty said when I explained the situation. Make them bleed where it hurts, but don't get caught. These people play dirty, and they've got lawyers. I am a lawyer, I pointed out. Well, Elena is. Exactly, Marty said. She knows how to use the system against you. You need to be smarter than that. So I got smarter. Elena decided to fight back by arranging a peace dinner at our house. The idea was to clear the air, establish some ground rules, and maybe convince me that I was overreacting to her friendship with Vincent. Vincent showed up 20 minutes late, which was the first mistake. He walked into our house like he owned it, kissed Elena on the cheek like I wasn't standing right there, and made himself comfortable at our dinner table. Sorry I'm late, he said, not sounding sorry at all. Traffic was murder. You know how it is, Jack. Oh, wait, you probably don't. I forgot you don't really travel much. Sam laughed. Actually laughed at Vincent's insult to her father. Vincent's been to Europe 3 times this year, she said. He's got amazing stories about Paris and Rome. You should hear them, Dad. I'm sure they're fascinating, I said, cutting into my steak with more force than necessary. Nothing like a good travel story from someone who's sleeping with your wife. Dad, Sam protested. Jack, please, Elena said. We're trying to have a civilized conversation here. Are we? I asked. Because it seems like we're having dinner with the man who's planning to move into our house after you steal it from me. Vincent leaned back in his chair, smiling like he was enjoying the show. Jack, I think you're misunderstanding the situation here. Elena and I work together. We're friends. If you're feeling threatened by that friendship, maybe you should ask yourself why. That's when I made my proposal. You know what, Vincent? You're right. I am feeling threatened. But not for the reasons you think. I stood up from the table. See, I used to box when I was younger. Amateur stuff, nothing fancy. But I learned something important. When someone challenges you, you don't back down. You step up. What are you saying? Vincent asked, his smile fading. I'm saying let's settle this like men. You and me, 3 rounds in the garage, old school family tradition. Elena started to protest, but Vincent held up his hand. It's okay, Elena. If Jack needs to prove something, I'm happy to accommodate him. Big mistake. We went out to the garage where I keep a heavy bag and some old boxing equipment. I gave Vincent a pair of gloves and headgear, then laced up my own gear. Elena and Sam stood by the workbench, Elena looking worried, Sam holding up her phone to record everything. Just so we're clear, I said as we touched gloves, this is about respect. You've been disrespecting my family, my marriage, and my home. Time to see if you can back up all that confidence. Vincent threw the first punch, a wild haymaker that missed by 6 inches. I responded with a quick jab to his solar plexus, just hard enough to knock the wind out of him. He doubled over, gasping. Come on, Vincent, I said. Show Elena what kind of man she's trading me for. He came at me again, throwing punches like he was swatting flies. I slipped most of them and landed a solid hook to his ribs. Vincent went down on one knee, whimpering. Please, he gasped. I give up. Already? I asked. We've only been going for 30 seconds. Elena rushed over to help Vincent to his feet. That's enough, Jack. You've made your point. But Sam was still recording, and she was laughing. Oh my God, she said, reviewing the video on her phone. Vincent, you look pathetic. Dad barely touched you and you're crying. That's when I realized something important. Sam wasn't loyal to Elena or Vincent. She was loyal to whoever seemed stronger. And right now, that was me. Send me that video, I told Sam. Dad, I don't think, Elena started. Send it, Sam said, already uploading the file. This is hilarious. Within an hour, the video was all over social media. Vincent getting dominated by a middle-aged mechanic, crying for mercy after 30 seconds of light sparring. Elena's law firm colleagues saw it. Vincent's friends saw it. His wife definitely saw it. Vincent's reputation was destroyed, but I was just getting started. The next morning, I took a personal day from the shop and did some real detective work. I'd been thinking about what Marty said about making them bleed where it hurts. For Elena, that meant her career. For Vincent, it meant his marriage and his money. I started with Vincent's social media accounts, which were surprisingly easy to hack. The man used the same password for everything, BMW2023. Not exactly Fort Knox level security. What I found was interesting.
I cheated on you with your brother. What's wrong? I will not forgive you for this.
Watch more on Grammarly.com.
Vincent had been having affairs with multiple women, not just Elena. There were photos, messages, even hotel receipts that he'd stupidly uploaded to his cloud storage. The man was a serial cheater, and he was sloppy about it. I compiled everything into a nice, neat package and sent it to Vincent's wife, along with a note, "Thought you should know what your husband does on his business trips." Then I turned my attention to Elena's law firm. I'd always wondered how she could afford those expensive suits and jewelry on a small-town lawyer's salary. Turns out, she'd been padding her expense accounts and billing personal time as client work. Nothing huge, but enough to get her fired if the right person found out. So I made sure the right person found out. I sent an anonymous tip to the State Bar Association, along with copies of Elena's timesheets and expense reports that I'd photographed during one of her home office sessions. I also sent a copy to her boss, with a note suggesting he might want to audit her recent cases. But the real masterpiece was the house transfer papers. See, Elena had prepared the documents herself, which was her first mistake. She'd written them in standard legal language, but she'd forgotten that I actually read everything I signed, and I'd made a small addition before signing. Buried in the middle of paragraph 7, subsection C, I'd added a clause. In the event that the primary beneficiary vacates the property or attempts to sell said property within 30 days of transfer, full ownership shall revert to the original grantor. Elena had been so eager to get my signature that she'd never read the final version. The beauty of it was that it was completely legal. I hadn't forged anything or committed fraud. I'd simply added a condition to a contract, and Elena had agreed to it by accepting my signature. In 30 days, when Elena tried to sell the house to fund her new life with Vincent, she'd discover that the house belonged to me again, and there wasn't a damn thing she could do about it. But first, I had to survive 30 days of living with people who wanted to destroy me. Day 15 was when I discovered just how deep the conspiracy went. I was in the garage, working on a carburetor rebuild, when my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Check your email. You need to see this." The email contained screenshots of text messages between Sam and someone named Greg. I recognized the name. Greg Martinez was Elena's old college friend who ran a digital marketing company downtown. I'd met him a few times at parties, seemed like a decent guy. Turns out, Greg was anything but decent. The text messages revealed that Greg had been orchestrating everything. He'd encouraged Elena's affair with Vincent, provided advice on the house transfer, and even helped plan the financial aspects of their scheme. But here's the kicker. Greg wasn't doing it to help Elena. He was doing it to destroy me. 3 years ago, Greg had applied for a job at my shop. I'd turned him down because he didn't know anything about cars and had a bad attitude. Apparently, he'd been planning his revenge ever since. Greg had manipulated Elena into the affair, convinced her that she deserved better than a grease monkey husband, and helped her plan the house theft. He'd also been paying Sam to spy on me and report my activities. My own daughter had been selling me out for cash. The anonymous tipster turned out to be Mrs. Flynn, our 70-year-old neighbor who'd been watching the whole drama unfold from her kitchen window. She'd seen Greg coming and going from our house at odd hours, and had gotten suspicious enough to do some investigating of her own. That boy's been playing puppet master, she told me when I called to thank her. Your wife thinks she's running the show, but Greg's been pulling the strings all along. He's got some kind of grudge against you, Jack. You need to be careful. Careful. Right. I was way past careful. That night, I confronted Sam in her room. She was lying on her bed, scrolling through her phone like she didn't have a care in the world. How much is Greg paying you? I asked. She looked up, startled. What are you talking about? I've seen the text messages, Sam. I know you've been reporting my activities to Greg Martinez. I know he's been paying you to spy on your own father. What I want to know is, how much? Sam's face went pale, then defiant. It's not spying, it's just information. And it's only $50 a week. $50 a week to betray your father, I said. Congratulations, Sam. You've put a price on our relationship, and it's cheaper than most people spend on groceries. You don't understand, she said, sitting up. Greg explained everything. Mom deserves to be happy, and you're holding her back. This house, this town, this whole life, it's beneath her. She could be something special if she wasn't tied down to a mechanic. And what about me? I asked. What do I deserve? Sam shrugged. You'll figure something out. You always do. That's when I realized that my daughter didn't just dislike me. She was ashamed of me. Ashamed of my job, my education, my place in the world. Greg had tapped into that shame and used it as a weapon. But Greg had made one crucial mistake. He'd underestimated me. I spent the next week planning my counterattack like a military operation. Greg thought he was the mastermind, but he was about to learn that puppet masters can become puppets themselves. First, I needed to understand Greg's business. I spent 3 days researching his digital marketing company, studying his client list, his financial records, publicly available through business filings, and his personal life. Greg was divorced, lived alone in a downtown apartment, and drove a Tesla that he couldn't really afford. More importantly, Greg had been embezzling money from his clients. He was running a classic scheme where he'd bill clients for advertising purchases, then pocket the money and show them fake performance reports. It was smart, sophisticated, and completely illegal. I gathered evidence for a week, using the same surveillance techniques I'd used on Elena and Vincent. I followed Greg to meetings, photographed documents through his office window, and even managed to get recordings of him bragging about his scams to potential investors. Then I set the trap. I called Greg and asked to meet him at Murphy's Diner, a 24-hour place downtown where truckers and night shift workers grab coffee. I told him I wanted to discuss a business proposition related to Elena's situation. Greg showed up thinking he was meeting with a defeated man who wanted to negotiate surrender terms. Instead, he found someone who'd been planning his destruction for 7 days straight. Jack, he said, sliding into the booth across from me, I have to say, I'm surprised you called. Elena mentioned you've been acting erratic lately. Have I asked, sipping my coffee. Or have I been acting like someone who knows exactly what's going on? Greg's smile faltered slightly. I'm not sure what you mean. I slid a manila envelope across the table. Open it. Inside were photographs of Greg's embezzlement operation, copies of his fraudulent billing statements, and transcripts of his recorded conversations about the scheme. Greg's face went white as he flipped through the evidence. Where did you get this? He whispered. Same place I got the recordings of you manipulating my wife into an affair, I said. Same place I got the evidence of you paying my daughter to spy on me. Same place I got proof that this whole thing has been your revenge fantasy for 3 years. Greg tried to play it cool. I don't know what you think you've discovered, but I think I've discovered that you're a criminal, I interrupted. I think I've discovered that you've been running a long con on my family to get back at me for not hiring you. And I think I've discovered that you're about to lose everything. That's when Greg made his biggest mistake. He tried to run. He bolted from the diner and headed for his Tesla in the parking lot. But I'd been expecting this. I'd loosened his tire valve stems while he was inside, and by the time he reached his car, all 4 tires were flat. Greg stood in the parking lot, looking at his disabled car, then back at me, walking calmly toward him. You can't do this, he said. This is harassment. I'll call the police. Go ahead, I said. Call them. I'd love to explain to the police how you've been running an embezzlement scheme and manipulating married women into affairs. I'm sure they'll be very interested. Instead of calling the police, Greg tried to run on foot. Big mistake for a guy who spends all day behind a computer screen. I caught up with him in the alley behind the diner. Not because I'm fast, but because Greg was incredibly out of shape. He was wheezing and stumbling after 50 yards. "Please," he gasped, leaning against a dumpster. "What do you want?" "I want you to disappear," I said. "I want you to leave town, leave Elena alone, and never contact my family again. In exchange, I won't send your embezzlement evidence to the FBI." "You can't prove anything," Greg said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I can prove everything," I corrected. "I've got photos, recordings, bank records, and witness statements. I've got enough evidence to put you in federal prison for 10 years. Greg stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "What about Elena and Vincent?" "Leave them to me," I said. "They're about to learn some hard lessons about consequences." 2 days later, Greg's digital marketing company quietly closed its doors. Greg himself disappeared, leaving behind only a forwarding address in another state, and a lot of confused clients wondering where their money went. One puppet master down, 2 more to go. With Greg out of the picture, Elena and Vincent were left to face the consequences of their actions without their behind-the-scenes manipulator. It was like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion. Vincent's wife had filed for divorce and was demanding half of everything, including his precious BMW. Elena's law firm had suspended her pending an investigation into her billing practices. And Sam was starting to realize that her $50 a week spy gig had disappeared along with Greg. But the real fireworks were still to come. Day 28 was when Elena discovered the clause in the house transfer papers. She'd been meeting with a real estate agent about listing the house, planning to sell it and split the proceeds with Vincent so they could buy that condo by the river. The real estate agent had asked to see the deed, and Elena had confidently handed over the transfer papers. That's when the agent spotted my addition. "Mrs. Morrison," the agent said, "I'm not sure you can sell this house." "What do you mean?" Elena asked. "The house is in my name. I have the papers right here." "Yes, but there's a clause here that says ownership reverts to your husband if you try to sell within 30 days of the transfer. And according to this date, you've only got 2 days left." Elena snatched the papers back and read them carefully for the first time. I was in the garage when I heard her scream. She came storming out to confront me, waving the papers like a weapon. "You son of a bitch," she said. "You tricked me into signing a rigged contract." "I didn't trick you into anything," I said, not looking up from the engine I was rebuilding. "I added a clause to protect my interests, and you agreed to it. That's how contracts work." "You knew I wouldn't read the whole thing," she accused. "I knew you'd be so eager to screw me over that you wouldn't pay attention to the details," I corrected. "There's a difference." Elena was practically vibrating with rage. "This is fraud. I'll sue you for everything you've got." "With what lawyer?" I asked. "You're suspended, remember? And Vincent's not exactly available to help you, what with his own divorce proceedings and all." That's when Elena played her last card. "Sam will testify against you. She'll tell the court that you've been harassing us, stalking us, destroying our property." I finally looked up from my work. "Will she? Are you sure about that?" Elena's confidence wavered. "Of course she will. She's my daughter." "She's also broke," I pointed out. "Greg's not paying her anymore, and her college tuition is due next week." Funny thing about teenagers, their loyalty tends to follow the money. As if on cue, Sam appeared in the garage doorway. "Mom," she said quietly, "we need to talk." Elena turned to her daughter with relief. "Sam, thank God. Tell your father that you'll support me in court. Tell him that you've witnessed his harassment." Sam looked uncomfortable. "Actually, Mom, I've been thinking about what Dad said, about putting a price on our relationship. And I realized something." "What?" Elena asked. "I realized that you never offered me anything," Sam said. "You just expected me to take your side because you're my mother. But Dad's the one who's been paying for my college, my car, my phone, everything. And you were planning to take his house and leave him with nothing." Elena's mouth fell open. "Sam, you don't understand the situation." "I understand that you've been cheating on Dad with Vincent," Sam said. "I understand that you've been planning to steal his house. And I understand that Greg was paying me to spy on my own father, and you knew about it. That's not, Lena started. It is, Sam interrupted. And I'm done. I'm 18 years old, Mom. I can choose which parent to live with. And I choose Dad. Elena stared at her daughter in shock, then at me, then back at Sam. You're both insane, she said finally. Fine. Keep the house. Keep each other. Vincent and I will start over somewhere else. Good luck with that, I said. Vincent's going to be pretty busy with his divorce proceedings and his bankruptcy. Turns out, his wife is taking him for everything he's worth. Elena stormed out of the garage, and I heard her car peel out of the driveway a few minutes later. Sam and I stood in the silence for a moment. Dad, she said finally, I'm sorry. About the spying, about taking Greg's money, about everything. I know you are, I said. But sorry doesn't fix trust. That's going to take time. How much time? She asked. However long it takes, I said. But we'll figure it out. 2 days later, the house officially reverted to my ownership. Elena had nowhere to go except Vincent's apartment, which was awkward since Vincent's wife had frozen all his assets, and he could barely afford rent. But I wasn't done yet. There was still one more